JWC, or the James E. Wagner Cultivation Corporation, is a large Canadian licensed cannabis production facility. Located in Kitchener, Ontario, JWC has grown immensely since their humble beginnings in 2008 to opening a standalone facility that's over 3,000 square feet in size to accommodate demand. Because of their continued growth, JWC knew that they would need to implement a security system that was scalable and that could grow along with them. In this case study, we're going to take a look at what happened when they turned to the experts at Bulldog Fire and Security for a solution.
JWC, or James E. Wagner Cultivation Corporation, is a licensed producer of cannabis. We were formed under the MMAR by a group of growers and patients, formed a collective to support each other to learn how to grow cannabis better. We began doing extensive research into cultivation methodologies. We researched every cultivation method possible, which led to the development of our proprietary Growth Storm production platform. We're now the first and largest producer of aeroponically grown cannabis in Canada, using our own proprietary technology. We have two facilities here in Kitchener, Ontario. Our initial pilot facility, 15,000 square foot building now completely operational and in full production, and an expansion facility, a 345,000 square foot standalone building, which will be our flagship full-scale facility once completed. I think there's lessons to be learned in both of the security implementations we did at each of our buildings. The initial building is a multi-tenant building, and whenever you're dealing with a site which has multiple separate tenants in it, there are always additional security concerns. This building the unit had to be reinforced. We applied a metal mesh to the walls, and we used additional perimeter sensors in order to make sure that there was no penetration from the other units into ours. This created a whole sort of cascade of additional security concerns there, but all of them were handled, and we are one of the only licensed producers growing in a multi-tenant building, thanks to Bulldog and their team finding the correct solutions for us. The new building is a completely different set of challenges. It's a very large building. We're building out a small section of it to begin with. We've built out about 50,000 square feet of total space. Now this is a big bite into the 345,000, but it still leaves a lot of empty warehouse space. So the challenge here was how to secure an entire large building while incurring as little cost as possible on the initial phase. We're going to continue rolling out pods of our flowering rooms, which are about 12,000 square feet in total until the building is full. But those revenues will come over time. So our challenge, as I said, was to keep the initial cost down. I think we did that quite successfully by defining a perimeter at the exterior wall of the building without having to use the fence line, which sort of loosely encircles the building as it stands. As time passes, we'll continue to expand those security protocols, and we'll move outward toward that fence perimeter. But the initial implementation is quite successful at securing the spaces that we have built out thus far. From our perspective, I think it would be more unusual if our security needs didn't change for a period of a few months at a time. This is a new industry, and it is constantly in flux. Regulators are determining what it is that they need to see. Companies are still determining what it is that they need to do to meet regulators' expectations. So there's a lot of movement in terms of expectations and outcomes. In recent months, we've seen the storage requirements change drastically. We've gone from having a requirement for a high security vault as defined under the Directive for Physical Security Measures for the storage of controlled substances, down to having no requirement at all in that regard. The way that we access our grow rooms and the way that we monitor personnel in those grow rooms has changed dramatically in that period as well. So there have been a lot of changes in recent times, but generally speaking, the movement has been towards a loosening of the overall security requirements. The original requirements were quite stringent, and we required a large amount of equipment to satisfy a need for a complete visual of the site at all times. And now, of course, there are areas within our site which are access controlled and monitored, but we don't require that constant video monitoring of the entire space. So I think that's a trend that we'll likely see continue into the future to a certain limit. Obviously, we still need a high level of security when we're cultivating cannabis at these sites. I mean, Bulldog has always been very knowledgeable. They've always had the correct equipment and technologies to meet our needs, and they're in touch with what's going on in the industry. So they have a certain insight into the way that these processes unfold and what to expect as we go forward. They've always been willing to accommodate these changes. They understand, as we do, that in order to continue doing business, Health Canada has to be dealt with, and we're going to have to continue to meet their expectations, no matter what those expectations are. So overall, it's been a very positive experience working with the good team at Bulldog. You know, it's interesting. One of our architects talked a lot as we were building our facility about the similarity to data storage centers, and I think there is a lot of similarity there. In many ways, what we're doing is protecting a very similar set of assets. Instead of servers, we have plants, but all of them have a certain value that needs to be inherently protected, which is where, you know, the expertise of Bulldog really comes in handy, because they've done that sort of work as well, and they're able to help us with our data infrastructure, as well as our physical security, protecting the plants as assets themselves. Well, as I mentioned, we went with a number of different potential contractors, and we eventually settled on a consultant who recommended Bulldog. We're happy that they did. You know, some of the other systems certainly would not have been sufficient. They wouldn't have protected us sufficiently, and they certainly wouldn't have met the requirements of the ACMPR. So sort of, you know, trial and error and lucky chance that found us working with Bulldog in the long run.